So after everything that's happened since January 6th, would Mike Pence still support his old boss if Trump runs for president again? The former vice president was asked that question after a speech to a conservative group last night. Here's what he said.
Mr. Pence, if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee for president in 2024, will you vote for him?
Well, there might be somebody else I'd prefer more. You know, what I can tell you is I have every confidence that the Republican Party is going to sort out leadership. All my focus has been on the midterm elections, and it'll stay that way for the next 20 days. But after that, we'll be thinking about the future, ours and the nation's, and I'll keep you posted, okay?
Joining us now are pollster and CNN political commentator Kristen Soltis Anderson, CNN political commentator Scott Jennings, and CNN senior political analyst Nia Malika Henderson. What a moment to hear him say that. I wonder, Scott, what you thought about it.
Well, on the one hand, Donald Trump did send a mob to kill him, and so I could understand why he might not want to commit to voting for him if he's the Republican nominee.
It hasn't stopped Kevin McCarthy, but it's stopping Mike Pence.
They weren't there chanting, "Hang Kevin McCarthy." They were saying, "Hang Mike Pence."
No, but he felt in danger, but that's the point. He felt in danger. So, yes.
But the other thing is, clearly, he's running. I mean,
yeah,
he wants to be the president. He's going to run. He thinks he's going to be running against Donald Trump. What I thought was noteworthy about this speech was a forceful defense of traditional conservatism and kind of a condemnation of populism. And that's the lane he's staking out. We'll see if there's a market for it. The pollster may be able to tell us. We'll see if there's a market for it in the Republican Party. I think it's candidly 50-50. 50 want Trump and 50 want something else. It's just the something else right now is super fragmented.
That's right. And I think the something else, there may be folks that are looking to turn the page from the Trump era. And you can almost imagine Vice President Pence sort of being representative of still sort of carrying some of the baggage of that era over, even though in his own words, he would, prefer someone else. I think the fact that he is so now closely associated with all of the drama around January 6th, I think just makes him a challenging person, even if he's done the right thing all along, to be the person to help the Republican Party turn that page.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we'll see how many people jump into this 2024 field when it actually kicks off. He seems to suggest, in 21 days or 22 days, after the midterms, he might make some sort of decision. When does Donald Trump decide to run? It sounds like it's a matter of if and not when. And then all of the other folks, people like Ron DeSantis, he has become a real star in the Republican Party. Can he take that stardom to a bigger stage and actually challenge somebody like Donald Trump? You've got Greg Abbott down in Texas, who's a governor down there doing well and up for re-election, obviously. So we'll see. But again, I think the heart and soul is still with Donald Trump. If you ask Republicans, if you look at the polls, the majority of Republicans are still with Donald Trump.
See, I've seen some polling lately in which Trump has about 47, 48, 49 if you do like a primary ballot, and then everyone else divides up the other. That's why I keep saying it's like a 50-50 party. Now, the structure of the Republican primary is protective of anyone who can start the race with 40, 45, 50%. It's how Trump got the nomination in 16. And so, to your point, if all these people run, it's really a cocoon for Trump because it fragments the opposition. And I think a lot of people will run, but how long will they stay in? Remember in 16, the field just didn't collapse fast enough for anyone to mount a serious challenge.
I'm so curious what your focus groups are saying. First, though, I just want to play another soundbite from Pence. And I hear what you're saying. He may have a very small army behind him, even if he is kind of carrying the banner for it. But this is what a student at this Georgetown event last night asked Pence about January 6th. And his answer here was pretty significant.
Why haven't you extended that bravery to publicly denouncing the violence of January 6th?
I'll never describe that day or the violence in any other way than the way I described it that day and the way I describe it today. It was violence, it was unacceptable, but at the end of the day, it was a triumph for freedom, thanks to people in both political parties who did their job.
Like a why, yes, I will, but I know a lot of Republicans who are behind Trump obviously don't agree with what Pence is saying there. What are you hearing from people?
Well, I did some focus groups for the New York Times over the course of the last year, and one of them was of Republicans asking them about how they felt about January 6th on the one-year anniversary of that terrible day. And what was fascinating was that many of them did have some affection for Mike Pence. They felt that he was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place in that situation, but very few of them viewed what he had done as outright bravery. That instead, actually, there's this weird dynamic where I think many of us around this table, I don't want to put words in your mouth, would say that somebody like Mike Pence coming out and criticizing Donald Trump, that that's a brave thing, that that's him being authentic to who he is. But a lot of these Republican voters actually view that as not being authentic, that actually, that deep down in their hearts, they like Trump, but they just criticize him to try to win over the favor of the establishment. It's a very odd dynamic, and I do think that it's going to make it more challenging for someone like Mike Pence. Again, even if there is about half the Republican Party that might like to look for someone new, it might make it challenging for him to take that entire 50%.
That's very interesting. I do want to ask you about Joe Biden, because some new poll numbers out looking at his approval, and I just wonder how big of a problem you think they are for him, because you have approval and then disapproval. But when you're looking at strongly disapprove versus strongly approve, we're talking being outnumbered 3-1.
Yeah. This is sort of different from other candidates we've seen, certainly other presidential folks. The problem, I think, with Biden was that he was never a beloved figure, right? Yeah. If you think about somebody like Obama, you think about somebody like Trump, you think about somebody like Bush, people loved them. They elected him. The party faithful absolutely adored them. And for Biden, it was, he's not Trump. We want him in office. Democrats said, some independents, some Republicans as well. But there wasn't a real passion, right? People didn't fall in love with Joe Biden. And so I think you see that reflected in some of the polling. It's sort of a weak support and then just strong disapproval among some.
I mean, Joe Biden's a president because he ran against two crazy people. I mean, he didn't seem as crazy as Bernie Sanders, and he didn't seem as detestable as Donald Trump. So he ran up the middle there. So on his own, he's never been that popular. Comparatively to two people that seemed fringy, he looked okay. And I think he ultimately won the election because people gave him one job, and that was to just replace Donald Trump. And his presidency has been largely a disappointment if you look at the right track, wrong track, his approval, economic numbers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this portends a rough ride in 2024 if he runs against anybody but Trump. My personal view is the new person, whoever that is, would have a pretty good chance of defeating him.
I wonder what you guys are thinking about this Wisconsin race, because we have some very, very good reporting coming from our Manu Raju and our Alex Rogers. And what they are telling us is that state Democrats, state party Democrats, are kind of freaking out. And they're freaking out at national Democrats because they feel like they messed up. They feel like that. I mean, am I characterizing this properly? I think I am, right?
Yes.
So they thought they really had a chance to unseat Ron Johnson with the Lieutenant Governor, Mandela Barnes, and then here this lead has been, in their view, squandered, they feel, because national Democrats didn't do what they needed to do. Is that how you see it, or is this just about kind of headwinds against Democrats kicking in at the last minute?
Well, there are headwinds against Democrats, and there were always going to be. They're the party out of power. You've got an economy that's got a lot of problems. The right track, wrong track number, as Scott has pointed out, a lot of Americans think the country's on the wrong track. All these things add up to a really tough year for Democrats, which means really tough choices about where resources go in the national party. And so you are going to hear a lot of frustration being vented over the next couple of weeks that's going to be cranked up as more and more polls come out showing that Republican momentum if it comes to pass. Of folks saying, why did you give $5 million in that race and not $5 million in this race? Why did you give $50 million in that race and not this race? Because then we could have saved this majority. You're going to hear a lot of that.
Yeah, and Democrats want to focus on their incumbents. They want to hold the line, in Georgia, in Arizona. Maybe they can make a reach in a place like Pennsylvania. But Wisconsin, I don't think many Democrats actually believe that poll, right? Showing Mandela Barnes up by like 6 or 7 points in Wisconsin, right? I mean, the other story, I think, is incumbents are running pretty good in these states, whether you're a Democrat or you are a Republican. Incumbency has its privileges.
You know what's crazy about that race is the Democrats actually collapsed the primary. They didn't have one. Everybody got out of his way, and they got out of the way of the worst nominee for a major target state this year, the most liberal nominee, unvetted nominee. They have no one to blame but themselves.
Scott, Nia, Kristen, thank you guys so much for the conversation. I do appreciate it.